wish to call to order this work session of the Monroe County Board of Commissioners, and I will note for the record, all three commissioners are once again present in the Nat U Hill Room. And first on our agenda today is Drew Myers from Planning. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so first on the work session agenda, we have REZ-22-12, the Rolfson rezone, also known as Ordinance 2023-10. This went to the Plan Commission on March 21st, where it received a vote to forward with a positive recommendation of 6-3 with some additional conditions. I will touch on those at the end of my brief presentation here. Again, this just being a work session, I'm just going to go over some high-level stuff. I will have a more formalized presentation with PowerPoint slides for the formal session. Okay, so everything that you see in the red text throughout this Plan Commission packet was added to that last Plan Commission meeting. It's gone to 3 Plan Commission meetings. It went in January, February, and in March. So all the red was the latest additions to the report since being presented, to the March meeting. So overall, the parcel is totaling 19.341 acres. It's in Bloomington Township at 4851 North Kinzer Pike. The petitioner is proposing to amend the zoning map from State Residential 1 to Agricultural Rural Reserve, and the intention behind this rezone request is to provide the appropriate zoning designation to establish a winery on the property. Now, the land use of a winery is not permitted in the RE1 zoning district. However, crops and pasturage are among a few other uses within that district. It is a Chapter 833 zone, so the Agri-R zone is a Chapter 804 zone, the difference being that 2-mile fringe area that has transitioned through time from the City of Bloomington's planning jurisdiction to the county's jurisdiction. Overall, if the rezone request is approved by the County Commissioners, the petitioner intends to complete the planning process for the establishment of a winery on the property, which would include all applicable site plan requirements, including parking, paving, landscaping, building permits, grading permits, etc. That type of review, the commercial site plan review, would be performed administratively by planning staff. If the rezone is denied, the petitioner may continue to operate the property as a single-family residence, which is the previous use that was on the site before this petition was proposed, or the petitioner may pursue any of the available uses as outlined in Chapter 833 of the Monroe County zoning ordinance for the RE1 zone, as long as any special conditions could be met. So the start of this process began with communication with the petitioner. He had recently purchased the property and had initial conversations with planning regarding the CDO map, the county development ordinance. He had reviewed on that map that this property was likely going to be rezoned into the Ag 2.5 district. That struck him, and he wanted to talk to planning about the possible zoning implications of that transition. Planning staff communicated to him that the Ag 2.5 district and that whole map that he was referencing was a draft, that it is subject to change, and that the Ag 2.5 proposed district in the CDO would likely mirror or be very similar to the Ag-RR district, being that there is plenty of room for changes from that moment to the full adoption of the CDO, which is some time away. The petitioner did initially have some grand plans for the property in full transparency. However, with communications through staff about the requirements for that type of use being more of a mixed use sort of thing, and that would be more of a PUD process, the petitioner scaled back and stated that they really just want to do a winery, and that there is, that is the primary use, that is the use of the property as a winery. There are definitions for event centers in the chapters. Chapter 801 and Chapter 813 offer some guidance on event centers. Chapter 802 in the Ag-RR district does allow for agricultural event centers. And I've included some information here from Chapter 813 about those types of standards. The plain definition of event center from Chapter 801, you'll see it come up in Chapter 802 as just those words, event center. That's different from the agricultural event center in that it's only permitted in the more urban districts like general business and I believe low intensity, or excuse me, heavy industrial or light industrial. So the petitioner does have some explanation of the types of activities that will be going on the property. So much smaller scale gatherings, typical uses that would be included with a type of winery. Through conversations, there has been a lot of conversation through the Plan Commission and members of the public regarding the property and the roadways that meet it. There's been a lot of discussion on traffic flows, as well as lots of talk about offering some conditions of approval in the form of a written commitment. The petitioner did provide a written commitment at the end of this packet that offers some guidance and certainties on what the property would actually be in the end. There is some restriction of uses from the AgRR district, as well as some other items, such as types of events and that sort of thing. The comprehensive plan has this entire area designated as, see, it's kind of hard to see here, but it's farm and forest. And the current zoning map, if I can scroll back to it. Here we go. So it's currently zoned RE1, AgRR districts here in the northwest corner. I will also note that this map doesn't reflect it, but I will include a updated map in the formal presentation that this large 100 acre plus property that I'm outlining with my cursor, that was actually rezoned by the county commissioners to agricultural reserve in October of 2021. And that reason behind that rezone was to provide for the appropriate zoning to do a sliding scale subdivision. This property owner subdivided the property, created a small 2.5 acre homestead lot, and then the remaining acreage of the property is one lot with some designated or classified forest on it, I believe. Okay. The petition site is fairly flat. There's no real concern for slopes. There's no known karst. And the petitioner has also provided in the exhibits of this packet some renderings of what they have as an option for what the structures would be like on the property. Originally, there was some conversations from the highway department with the petitioner regarding the appropriate access. There was some talk about getting access off of West Bell Road, which is to the south, along here my cursor is, and then also what the access points would look like, from North Kinzer Pike. So it is the recommendation from the highway department through these conversations with the petitioner that the North Kinzer Pike entrance is acceptable, trying to stay away from having too much traffic on this more residential road, of West Bell Road to the south. So I'm going over some high level things still here. There's no comments at this stage from Stormwater. They would review, their comments would come in through the commercial site plan review stage. Here are some pictures from the site. This is West Bell Road here to the right of the photograph. And then this is just a quick and easy picture of the entire site itself. There was an old farmstead structure on the property that has since been torn down. So the property is currently vacant. Here's all the findings of fact. And here we have the petitioner's letter and consent letter. Originally, when the petition was submitted, there was a other property owner, but since then, the petitioner is now the owner of the property. Here are some renderings of what they suspect the winery could look like. Again, it'll have facilities for distilling and processing grapes from the vines and vineyards that they'll have on the property, as well as tasting area and some other uses that are pertinent to the running of a winery business. Okay. I'm going to keep scrolling through some of these exhibits and see if anything else jumps out at me for today's work session. There's a lot of content in this packet. As you know, it's gone to 3 Plan Commission meetings. So each time there is more and more added. Hopefully you have the time to get through all this content and ask me any questions. I think I will open it to the floor for questions now and see what kind of discussion we can drum up.
I'm sorry, did you mention the conditions? Did I just miss that?
Oh, yes, sorry, let me scroll down to those. So planning staff has maintained a recommendation of approval for this petition, being that it is in line with the comprehensive plan and the citing of the findings of fact and the recommendations of the highway department. But we do have some conditions of approval. Let me go back to here we go. So at the Plan Commission meeting, like I stated before, it was forwarded with a positive recommendation with a vote of 6-3, and with the following conditions. 1, the petitioner submit a right-of-way activity permit application that was speared by the Highway Department. That is basically a driveway permit. The Highway Department project manager needs to see that permit come through in order to evaluate the appropriate location of a new driveway, or if the existing driveway is acceptable given site distance, measurements, that sort of thing. Number 2, the written commitment be reviewed and approved by the Monroe County Legal Department. And number 3, kind of a subset of number 2, the written commitment include the additional language regarding a 14-day deadline for its reporting. So in early meetings of the Plan Commission, the petitioner took the comments from the Plan Commission and under their recommendation created a written commitment that's included in this packet as one of the exhibits. And it basically self-restricts the types of uses that the broad agricultural reserve district would allow. So they striked some of those uses from that list that would be considered very like highly nuisance or just didn't fit with the nature of the area, as well as some other commitments regarding the business itself. But at this final stage of the Plan Commission meeting, we requested that some language be added to it regarding recording of that written commitment. The legal department has recommended that we include language about an automatic recording by staff, if you will, within a 14-day period if the petition were to be approved by the county commissioners. Just some buffer or some assurance that it would be recorded.
Thank you. Having been without electricity all weekend, I haven't really gotten through this yet, and we'll definitely want to look at it a bit more closely.
Commissioner Thomas.
I was among a no vote in the Plan Commission because the neighbors are very concerned about an event center. I think if I interpreted their comments correctly, I don't think they would mind a winery. I don't think they would mind a vineyard. I think it's the event center that worries them. And I think rightfully so. We've seen this happen in other parts of our county where event centers have really impacted neighborhoods in a negative way. And so I would like to ask the folks who live in that vicinity in Bell Road and Kinzer area, if they would review the proposed restrictions by the petitioner for times for the events and contact us via phone or email or drop by our office hours or come to our meeting when we actually hear this case and let us know if that's sufficient or not. And I think I think it really is up to the neighbors at this point, in my mind, because it is going to change their neighborhood. And I do not see this as fitting farm and forest, which is the proposed zoning for this area anyway, so I have concerns about that. But I just do want to ask the folks who live in that area if they would please reach out to us and let us know if they're satisfied with the self-imposed restrictions, and know that there is no way that we can address them if there's something goes wrong. If something happens, the person doesn't, they sell out, the next person comes in, they don't live up to those agreements, we have no way that I can think of requiring and enforcing that written commitment. That's my other concern. So I think the idea of a vineyard and a winery is lovely. I have no issue with that. My concern is the event center and the changes it will bring to a residential neighborhood that's been there for decades.
I also, when I looked at the difference between the event center activities and the agricultural center that was allowed, it looked like in the agricultural center it could be up to 40 days of activity or events at the property. I wondered how that would ever be recorded or enforced to keep it at that maximum.
Yeah, so let me clarify here. There's 3 different types of land use classifications that are under discussion. One is the winery, which is defined in Chapter 802 here on the screen. That is its own land use classification. There are 2 other land use classifications, event center and then agricultural event center. Agricultural event center, that is something that is not being proposed here by the petitioner. Agricultural event center, some of the examples of that would be a wedding venue in the county where they have to have some sort of farming or agricultural accessory use, whether that be a hay field or a sunflower field, something like that, that they are like cultivating, that there's some sort of agricultural component, but the main use of the property is an event center, hosting events. And Chapter 813, which is our conditional use chapter, that offers guidance on that particular use classification. Event center is defined in Chapter 801. That is a more urban style event center that is hosting outdoor activities such as weddings, receptions, banquets, corporate events. But again, it's only permitted in the general business district noted here. Winery is a completely separate use classification. The petitioner did go through the use determination process to determine, based on their provided information, which use would best classify, and winery was that particular use. And here in the definition, it talks about processing, includes wholesale sales, crushing, fermenting, blending, aging, storage, bottling, administrative office functions for the winery, warehousing, retail sales, and tasting facilities of wine and related promotional items may be permitted as part of the winery operations. So I hope that offers some clarity between these 3 different use classifications.
So they are not asking for an agricultural center, event center? Is that?
Correct. They are not asking for an agricultural event center. They're asking for a winery. And some of the activities that they are proposing within the winery include tasting events, if you will. The petitioner has discussed the type of size of those things being small or intimate, as well as occasional outdoor acoustic music or other small event type things like that. They do include some of this information in their written commitment, and the petitioner will be available during the regular session to answer any other questions regarding the extent of the use itself.
I also was a little bit concerned about the amount of truck traffic that would be on North Kinser, because with 19 acres, they probably are not going to be growing all the grapes that they'll be processing. So Do we have any sense of what that's going to be, not only for bringing the grapes in, but for shipping out product?
Yes, the petitioner, I believe, has included that information in one of their exhibits.
Okay.
So Exhibit 5 is the petitioner's response to the Plan Review Committee, who was the first committee to review this petition. So there's some good information there, touching on some of the concerns that were brought up during the Plan Review Committee. Let's see here, and I think there's some other narratives included in this packet. Exhibit 9 has letters of support or opposition. Let's see here. There's lots of exhibits, so bear with me here. Let me go back to the top. Okay. Let's see here. The petitioner's letter, Exhibit 1, offers some background. Like I said, the written commitment offers some background as well. And then, let's see here. The petitioner's Kinzer Pike Road width and crash data narrative, Exhibit 7, that touches on some of the concerns that have been brought up by the Highway Department initially and some of the property owners in the area regarding truck traffic, as well as how many trucks they would be expecting, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to dig into it more deeply before we hear this finally also.
Absolutely.
Is there any other?
I would like us to wait a couple weeks before we hear this at a regular meeting, just to give you all time to read this packet and think through it, and to give the folks in the area time to respond.
So do you have a date that you want to see it? I'm trying to find my calendar here real fast. Are you suggesting that it come back on April 19th or April 26th? Do you have a preference?
I don't.
Commissioner Jones? Why don't you bring this back to us on April the 26th, if that is agreeable to everyone?
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Myers. Appreciate all the
Thank you. And
thoroughness.
of course, and if anyone has any questions remaining, feel free to reach out to me and I can get those answered.
All right, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, we again have someone from Planning, Ann Crecilius, here to talk about Ordinance 2023-11. Do we have Ms. Crecilius with us? Is she one of the panelists? There she is.
Good morning. Just got promoted. Thank you.
It's still morning, barely, but yes, hi.
Yeah. Okay. So we have an outline plan amendment before you today, Ordinance 2023-11. So this is the North Park PUD Outline Plan Amendment number 5, and this is a change to Section 8 of the Outline Plan, the Street and Alternative Transportation Guidelines section. So the petitioner is the Monroe County Redevelopment Commission and Kreider & Kreider, Inc., and they're being represented by Bynum and Faneuil and Associates. Okay, so this is a area that involves a lot of parcels, but we would be looking at approximately a construction area of about 5.1 acres. So I'm going to jump around, of course, because we're here in the report. So this would be for the construction of a road connection within the North Park PUD, and this would be from North Curry Pike to West Hunter Valley Road. So this is the area illustrated in here. A large portion of this area is on PUD. It is approximately 2,500 feet of roadway. Let's see. So there's kind of two sections to this request, the outline plan amendment. The first section is a change to the section 8 specifically for this road connection. The second part of this request is that since the petitioner is already amending the North Park ordinance, they're going to go ahead and remove 3 road connections that are required within the North Park ordinance that they don't feel are necessarily required or really needed anymore. So this is the general area that we're looking at for the first section, the road connection construction. It will pass through an area of floodway. This outline plan amendment has been on kind of an accelerated timeline based on the planning administrator, the director's review. The redevelopment commission and the highway department have been working on this, and their engineers for quite a while. So the road design is pretty well hashed out already. They've filed for a development plan only for the road construction. We heard the development plan and this outline plan amendment at the same time. We kept it on the same schedule. So the plan commission has already voted on the development plan. So if this outline plan amendment is approved, the development plan is also approved, and it's conditional upon the approval. So again, going to jump back up. So we are looking at the first section change are for 4 standards in the street guidelines for the road connection only. So the first one is that the ordinance currently requires that 120 feet of right-of-way is dedicated the entire length of the road. This is just unobtainable in some areas. And I have another exhibit that from my PowerPoint at Plan Commission that I think is pretty helpful. So you've got a couple of links to the construction plans under the exhibits list. It's a really large document, so we include it as a hyperlink. But we do have this kind of overview of the road connection. So some of the areas that we're looking at. So here is the floodplain. There will be a precast bridge that will be put over Stouts Creek. This area has 120 feet able to be dedicated. Because there are so many property owners, a few property owners involved with this right-of-way acquisition, there is some need to vary the amount of dedicated right-of-way. So as we move forward, they were able to acquire approximately 90 feet of dedicated right-of-way. And then the next portion, it jumps down to 75 feet of dedicated right-of-way, and this is because there's a structure located. And so if the full 120 feet was dedicated, part of the structure would be in right-of-way. So in order to avoid that, they're requesting a minimum of 60 feet. There is some leeway there, and planning staff is supportive. As of right now, they're proposing 75 feet of dedicated. So they were able to not have to go as low. But the ordinance request would still include just the 60 feet. And we're fine with that and for having a little leeway if something changes when they do that right-of-way acquisition. The next portion, it jumps back up to 90 feet for the last section as it connects to North Arlington Road. So just an illustration of right-of-way dedication. Okay. The next 3 changes is a reclassification of roadway. So the North Park ordinance, it was the former director of the highway department included a very specific set of standards for street construction, and that is included as an exhibit in your packet. We would normally not always see this much detail for street construction because it is under the purview of the highway department. So some of these things, all of these changes actually are supported by the highway department as they've been outdated or just it makes sense for the area. So the next one is the North Park PUD had required that the road connection is designated as a minor arterial boulevard / secondary arterial. And the Highway Department has identified per the 2016 thoroughfare plan, they want to see this held to the classification of a major collector, those standards. So they're supportive of that change. The next is removal of street trees. So the ordinance requires that street trees are planted on both sides of the roadway. This is in the same section as where they talk about side paths and sidewalks. That will remain unchanged. In the construction plans, they do include a 4-foot sidewalk and also an 8-foot side path on the sides. The next one is reduction of speed. The ordinance requires that all streets have a minimum of 40 miles per hour speed limit. And just based on the design that they've agreed upon, the Highway Department and engineers, because of that curve on the east side of West Hunter Valley Road, they really can't get around that, and they've agreed to a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. Okay, so those are the changes specifically for the construction of the road connection. The next 3 changes, kind of under the group, is the removal of 3 road connections for this area. So under that memo, when this area was originally approved by the former director of the Highway Department, Bill Williams, he also included a really detailed section of road connections needed. So there are 3 in here that we are looking at that are, 20-some years later, we're saying is not necessarily needed anymore. So the first one is this road connection from State Road 46 North. It's supposed to come off of kind of a pre-existing driveway cut, which should stay the same, but it's supposed to go north and then in a cul-de-sac. They're proposing not to necessarily build this out. The engineer's reasoning is that this lot in North Park has, it's kind of constrained by a lack of buildable area, and if they can remove this required road section, it would allow a little bit more buildable area, and then they can design, the parking, the drive as needed. The next one is a connection from North Stone Branch Drive to West Bluebell Court. So they've done some work, and they don't necessarily believe that this neighborhood desires a connection south, and the highway engineer supports removing this road connection. That Mr. Paul Satterley states that it would possibly encourage cut-through traffic from Curry Pike, State Road 46 in Arlington, and that cut-through traffic has negative impacts on subdivisions, including higher volumes of traffic and higher volumes of truck traffic and increased speeds. And then the final removal road connection, which you all are all very familiar with this part. So this is a road connection going south on North Stone Branch Drive and then looping through the Commissioner's Quarry property and then connecting again to Hunter Valley Road. Of course, we know that there have been multiple environmental studies that detail, an environmental study that is detailed that the actual construction of this road connection would be very impractical because there are open quarry pits on the site. Again, the highway engineer, Paul Satterley, supports the removal of this and acknowledges that you as the county commissioners have shown interest in developing this site as a park. During the planning process, we have identified and requested that the petitioner provide a requirement that North Stone Branch Drive is developed with a cul-de-sac because it currently dead ends. So if this road connection is removed and the ordinance was left alone, that stub would just stay. So we requested that they propose a cul-de-sac, and they've included that language in the ordinance with a trigger so that if one of the adjacent sites starts to be developed, that the property owner is required to build out the cul-de-sac and finish it so it's safer for safety vehicles. Okay, that is the summary of this petition. Let me go down, make sure I haven't missed anything. So we do have the text edited. So these are the few pages of the North Park ordinance with the track changes that you'd see in Microsoft Word. We do have this, our goal is to, if this is approved, we will take these pages and sub them out just page perfectly for the new North Park ordinance instead of having, say, an amendment document. You can see all of the changes proposed just explicitly within the ordinance, but then the ordinance that will be approved and adopted will be the full North Park ordinance with those changes, because it's a 100+ page document for this area. Okay, so Plan Commission heard this March 21st, and they recommended sending a positive recommendation for this outline plan amendment to the county commissioners. They included a condition that the petitioner apply for a road name change in order to address the gap between North Curry Pike and West Hunter Valley Road. We had a very productive conversation about the history of road names in this area, history of the area. And so the condition originally had a little bit more finer detail, but we've settled on the petitioner should just apply for a road name change. Road name changes are under the purview of the Plan Commission. So based on our discussion at the last meeting, it sounds like the Plan Commission, when this is filed, they'll probably lean towards changing North Curry Pike to West Hunter Valley Road, but there's a lot of history there, and I believe the Monroe County Board of Historic Preservation will be involved with that. So let's see what else. Yeah, I believe that pretty much sums it up. Does anybody have any questions for me today?
Commissioner Jones.
I'm afraid, once again, this is one that I wasn't able to read yet. So it certainly sounds interesting, and I've heard this kind of project being talked about for a while, so I'm interested in seeing how it works out.
I was just going to say, as staff for the Redevelopment Commission, I know pretty much all about this, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Also, Randy Cassidy, who is on the RDC, is here, and essentially, I think the goal of the RDC is to complete the Curry Pike to Arlington. And when we were doing that and looking at that, we knew that that was the impetus of this. And then when they brought this here, the one that goes through the quarry holes on the quarry in the area that we bought is pretty self-explanatory. The other two, I think I'd want to see the actual map in a little different context, a little expanded out to be able to comment on those, but I think I know what they are, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I will note that Commissioner Thomas sits on the Planning Commission also and has heard about this. How does this fit with other development that is been talked about in North Park area?
I think
Go ahead.
You may be better to answer the other development outside the context of what we're looking at with the Redevelopment Commission. But with the Redevelopment Commission, there are still the two primary additional roads that I think we really see as valuable are the ones that connect to, you can, when you drive 46, you see kind of two stubbed out roadways. So they're still in the plan, those two roads connected to kind of the Curry Pike roadway, and so those I think are what we see as the kind of the next important ones, and I think we also see when that one of the roads that was deleted, when that property gets developed, I think that from a redevelopment commission, we think that should be part of the planning process on how that connection gets done. And I apologize.
Ms. Grisilius?
No, I wasn't sure who you're talking to. I was just going to mention that, yeah, this road connection is considered high priority by, of course, the Redevelopment Commission and Monroe County Highway Department, and that there are no development plans outside of for the road construction currently, but the North Park ordinance is set up in a manner so that the road, these road connections are required to be built out when there are development plans. So we won't necessarily see development plans for these areas until, at least for the adjacent properties, until this road connection is built.
Commissioner Thomas?
One of the things that came up is the question of Hunter Valley Road versus Curry Pike. And I'm wondering if my colleagues would be willing to chime in on the proposal made by members of the Historic Preservation Board of Review to rename the part of Curry Pike from the roundabout with Smith, all the way into the North Park area to put a proposal before the Plan Commission to rename that entire stretch of road Hunter Valley Road.
I very much like that plan. I do think that Hunter Valley is a pretty historic name in this community, and I would not want to see that name changed. And Curry Pike has a lot of functions as it goes further south. I think it would be pretty inconvenient for a lot of people to change that name. But changing it just to the roundabout won't really impact very much of anyone's. So I like that plan.
I would be in support of that.
Okay, so Ms. Crecelius, if you would ensure that that gets before the Plan Commission, that we've made that recommendation, that would be really great. Thank you. Thank you both.
Is there anything else that we need to be thinking about with scratching our heads about on this one? How soon do we want to hear this back? I think we'd be safe if we also asked for this on April 26th. Are you okay with that?
I am. I think we have to make sure that the wording is correct on this so that we're not stepping on our own toes with renaming this road. So I just want to make sure that that's reviewed before we see it too, so.
Okay. We may be reaching out to you with other questions, Ms. Crecelius, but with that, please bring this proposal back to us on April 26th, and we'll see you then. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Next up, we have Lori Kelly from the Health Department to talk about Chapter 341 revisions.
Good afternoon. So this afternoon we are proposing a discussion on changes to Chapter 341 and 310. There are a few key areas the Health Department needs to work out with Chapter 341 to be able to properly enforce and carry out the Commissioner's amendments to Chapter 310. So we are proposing to delay the Chapter 310 changes to March 1st of 2024. This will allow time for us to figure out many things, such as a payment processing system, and allow the markets to fall into the same licensing terms as the retail food establishments. And the department is proposing to include a seasonal food service establishment license of $85. This can be used by those who are operating 9 months or less out of the year. This term would also need to be added to our Chapter 341. Currently, it is not defined in Chapter 341, so we would need to insert that.
Comments and questions? Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I thought there had been some discussion at our last meeting about it actually being for a year because there are markets year-round.
Yes, so we are wondering if we should keep a seasonal market an option for those who operate 9 months or less. For example, if there are those that are just operating at the winter market for 5 months. Or if we need to encompass all of them in the annual term, then that needs to be defined in our Chapter 341.
And Ms. Kelly can correct me where I'm wrong, but I think there are also people who had applied for under the old permit that aren't at the market. There are other users of that, and so to lump those into that market use, we thought was going to cause confusion. I don't think it changes anything in principle. What you did at last week's meeting is this is just making an addition so that other users who aren't at markets but do have these kind of seasonal activities have a way to apply, and that's what this is designed to do. Did I state that right, Lori?
Yes, we have a few. Hi, my name's Jessica and I work in foods. And just to clarify, we have a handful of people who are in a brick and mortar, but they only operate seasonally. For example, the Bloomington Speedway, Randsburg, stuff like that, Brewster's Ice Cream. We also have vendors who pop up seasonally for like football games, examples like that, which if we eliminate that option, they will no longer have a license to participate in.
Commissioner Thomas.
No, I think this makes sense, and I'm fine with it as long as we've had legal review. I'm fine with it. Yeah, I appreciate it, and I know we kind of threw everybody for a loop when we changed things last week, but appreciate your flexibility.
So this is an addition to what we took care of last week. It's not a change from what we did last week.
Correct. We previously had the seasonal, so we're requesting to keep the seasonal, and then we're redefining that and defining the suggestion that you guys made for the multi-market license. That way there's two clear definitions for people can either fit in the seasonal or the farmers can participate in the multi-market license. So it makes both parties happy.
Great.
And then we would just like to delay the time that this actually rolls out to allow us time to be able to set up, how we process these payments and how we're going to, set up and establish a good, clear plan. And so that everyone in 2024 can get started kind of on that same annual timing path.
Good. Good. So bring this back next week for us to vote on? Does that meet everybody's approval? Especially since we have a day off on Friday here, so it's good to get this planned for next week pretty quickly. So,
Yes.
great. We'll see you back then on the 12th.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for explaining all this. Next up, we have Ms. Whitmer with the Parks Department.
I see a green light. Good, it's on. This is a very straightforward and reasonable request from MCCSC. They are asking that the commissioners grant approval of relocating the Cars Farm Greenway Trail in order to accommodate a new school track, which will also double as a car pickup and drop off for the parents. MCCSC has assured me in an email that they will pay 100% for the relocation and the preparation of a new easement, which I assume then I would bring back to you and you would accept the easement. But they just want to get going with design and so there's no delay because county legal has also recommended that I go to county council, which won't be for a few more weeks, to get the same approval.
Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, this does sound like a very reasonable request, and it's always nice to help out the school system where we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all in favor of this. Thank you for bringing it forward.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the easement is built back to the standard that the current one is, but I think that this will happen, and I agree with my colleagues that this is another way to support our school districts.
Also good news is that the MCCSC's engineer is Bledsoe Brigger Cooper James, which also does our trails. So everyone's quite aware of the standards and it will be built to identical to the one they're replacing.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excellent.
So Jeff, what do I need to do? What do I need to do next?
Well, I guess in my mind, I think that in order for us to remove, basically what the request is, we're going to give up an easement and then we're going to get an easement. So I think we'd have to go through that process. The reason the county council is involved is we don't think this is over $1,000 either way, but we don't want to have to go through a process of getting appraisals and things like that because that'll slow it down longer than anything. And again, it's the school, I think the only problem I saw with this is that are they going to have to move the mile markers at 5 feet from there to the end of time? But But I think letting them know that, then they can prepare the easement documents, both we're giving it up and we're getting it, those easement documents, and then we can do it that way. We'll also need to work out how the construction's gonna go, but I think there's nothing to vote on until we have the easement stuff.
Okay. I'll tell them that you're in support and they can start working. It's only a 40 feet difference and it won't affect our mile markers at all because they're actually not 100% precise now, so it's okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we take care of this item really quickly? We need to reappoint Guy Loftman to the Board of Zoning Appeals. His membership would expire on first Monday in January of 2026, which I believe is January 1st, but
Could you just make a motion?
I would like to make a motion that the Monroe County Board of Commissioners reappoint Guy Loftman to the Monroe County Board of Zoning Appeals. His membership will expire the first Monday in January in 2026.
Second.
Any other discussion? I feel like we are very lucky that Mr. Loftman devotes his time and energies to these kinds of things. And so, is there any discussion whatsoever? If not, I call for a vote on reappointment of Guy Loftman to the Board of Zoning Appeals. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you very much. We'll get to Mr. Parker in just a second. We have some, go ahead, Mr. Schilling. Go ahead. This is very quick, I think.
Yeah, just on that last item on the Guy Loftman issue, if you could timestamp that as well on that document, that would be helpful. This is proposing a letter to Jeff Stant of the Indiana Forest Alliance, thanking him for his efforts on behalf of the nature-loving public in regards to the Houston South case. He was a major contributor to that, and things have gone very well from the county's perspective in that case. Recently, the U.S. Forest Service has withdrawn its supplemental information response to that case, which will probably moot out the county's second lawsuit against the Forest Service. So that was good news. It'll save everybody time and money and hopefully get the Forest Service focused on the environmental impacts of their proposed project again. As part of this process, the county was able to obtain a preliminary injunction against the Forest Service for proceeding with the Houston South project. And as part of that process, the court required the posting of an $11,596 bond, which essentially was a letter stating that if the injunction was lifted in the future, that the county and the parties would pay that amount to the Forest Service. That bond letter needed to be submitted before Saturday, April 1st, and because the county is subject to notice requirements and so forth, we weren't able to put that together, so the Forest Alliance, the Indiana Forest Alliance, stepped in and provided that letter. So we wanted to let them know that if that letter should ever be called, if that security bond should ever be called, that the county would participate in that as well. And just while I'm up here, I would say thank you to the Friends of Monroe and their people who did an amazing job. Is it Sherry Brooker Mitchell? Had filed some extraordinary supplements for the preliminary injunction, and the Hoosier Environmental Council as well. So thanks to those groups as well. So I just present this letter to you, and you can give it some consideration.
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we fulfill the requirements of this letter to provide a security bond if needed regarding the Monroe County Board of Commissioners, et cetera, versus U.S. Forest Service case as noted on the document.
Second.
I would point out to people that one of the reasons that Monroe County participated in this suit is that we felt that any activity in the Houston South area of the National Forest was detrimental to the water quality in Lake Monroe. And so I thank my colleagues and people on the county council for making sure that this happened as well. And again, I also thank the various members, various community groups that joined us in this. I think it was very important. And so I am very much in favor of supporting this.
It's not over yet, but it's certainly moving in the right direction, and appreciate everybody, especially Mr. Schilling, but everybody in legal that's worked on this, so thank you.
Is there any other comment on this?
I think you need to take public comment.
Waiting. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, call for a vote on approval of the letter to Mr. Jeff Stant. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Schilling. The motion passes 3-0. Okay, now we have.
Ah,
Oh, okay. Okay. So,
thank you.
stamp this where? Oops, it's upside down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Need to write the time down on there too.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was 12:23 p.m. So, okay, we'll get that done.
Okay.
All right. So we have Mr. Parker, who's here to talk about points from, I guess it was the CJRC meeting on April the 3rd. Thank you for waiting patiently. This has been a long day.
Yes, it has. Okay. My ask here is very simple. I think everybody's aware of the email that the...
Is the mic turned on?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Can't
Turn
really
up
hear
here a
you.
little bit.
But, yeah, it's hard to hear, and it
Okay.
has to be picked up by cats.
My request is very simple. Everybody's aware of the email that the sheriff sent out on April 3rd. The email was pretty detailed, laid out some concerns that the sheriff had with the selection process involved in the selection of the architectural design firm. At the end of that email, there were 9 bullet points, and I was hopeful that at this meeting we could address and answer each of those 9 bullet points in the interest of transparency. The sheriff would have been here himself. However, he was scheduled to instruct a cultural awareness for law enforcement that's been on the books for months. He's got numerous police agencies involved there, and it's something that he just could not cancel. So I am only here to see if we can rectify those bullet points, see if we can get those answered so that the public will be aware of exactly how this occurred and exactly how, from our perspective, the information that has been put forth about this process appeared to be a very quick, concise, no dysfunction, everybody agreed, when in fact that wasn't the case. So I'm only here to see if we can have that discussion.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you say that last sentence again?
Well, I'm only here to see if we can have that discussion. Is that the sentence you're talking about?
No, you said something about, we thought that there was agreement.
It appeared from all of the discussions we've had about this process, about the vote, the unanimous vote and all that, that everybody on the committee was in lockstep. There was no dysfunction on the committee about that process, that everybody was in agreement, the vote was unanimous, all of those things that occurred, and that's simply not true. So hence the bullet points.
But none of us were there. None of the three of us were there. So I don't know how we can answer any questions about it. That's my concern.
That's one of the questions, is how did the commissioners come to assess, when you made those statements, that this vote was unanimous? And I think, there's one of those that said all of the people on this committee voted for DLZ. That is not true. There was no mention of anybody in the public. If you ask any member of the public right now, would they know that two of the members of that committee, because they were concerned about how this committee was, the process of this committee coming to that decision, didn't even submit a score sheet? None of that information was put out to anybody in the public. It was simply, there was a unanimous vote, everybody was happy about it, drive on. And that didn't happen.
So it's my understanding also that the sheriff had a designee. That's singular, not plural. And while two members of his staff did attend some of the things, to me that would indicate that only one of those should be voting at that time. And like the three of us, it's my understanding that you were also not part of that process and that you were not in these meetings. So we're all operating from secondhand information at this point. Or third.
I
None
disagree.
of us were party to that. Also, as Mr. Cockrell pointed out earlier during our formal agenda, that we are not required by law to undergo any of this kind of process whatsoever. We could have done this without input from people that we feel have better knowledge than we do about what needs to go into selecting a group to do this. And finally, I will point out that it wasn't just the interviews that took place with the three companies, but we have posted information on the CJRC website, at least about the written information from DLZ. So everybody has written information too that could be used for their evaluation.
I agree. The process wasn't required. But when you have a process, the process needs to be pure. The end result of that process needs to be accurate. The end process of that needs to be truthful. It needs to be transparent. So you say that, yes, there was one designee. But if you look at the agenda for March 8th at the special meeting, it lists 6 people. It lists all of the individuals, and it lists Matt Demings, who is the other person. So that has been established. Everybody in the public, myself included, thought that the committee consisted of those 6 people. It's right here on the agenda. I brought it with me if you care to see it. So when you say all the people in that committee, 6 people are listed on the committee, including Matt Demings, that means that all 6 of those people, if you're sitting out in the audience, they all 6 voted. I think that's fair that anybody would have assumed that. What we were expecting when this was announced was that those things would have been disclosed, that we had a committee, we had a vote. Just when I go to any council meeting, there's a roll call of the members there present. And I've heard this, that okay, if there's a unanimous vote, it's the members of who are present that are voting. I agree with that. I completely agree with that. But what happens, there's a roll call that says there's 7 people on this board. Let's use the council. If someone is not there, it's noted that Councilperson Smith is not present. So now when there's a unanimous vote or any type of vote, that person will always be excluded publicly that they did not participate in that vote. So what I expected and there were emails exchanged back and forth that Kyle Gibbons was having reservations with this, but we charged forward. There was never a score sheet submitted by Kyle Gibbons or Matt Demings. We charged forward. Now we have the announcement. What would have been the transparent thing to do is we had a vote. One member was not present. He did not vote. The rest of that voted was a unanimous vote. You should also know that 2 members of this committee did not submit score sheets. That's what happened. That is the truth. That is the transparent thing to do. But what really should have happened, is if there is disagreement, either disband the committee and exercise your statutory right as you were going to, or at least before this is announced in such a public way that it was all unanimous, put the disclaimers on it. Our question here is, did you know those things? As commissioners, did any of you know that Kyle Demings, or Kyle Gibbons and Matt Demings didn't submit a score sheet?
And were you at the meetings where they submitted the score sheets?
No, my guys have told me
Okay.
they didn't submit them.
Okay, we've heard something other reported to us at one of the meetings.
I'll bring Kyle Gibbons and Matt Demings in here if you want.
Yeah, I think,
This isn't a court.
yeah, I think one of my concerns is that there's this implication, and just to make sure everybody's aware of what happens, there seems to be this implication that we've all been in on some big process behind closed doors. We heard from the committee at a work session here in this room that is, and the members of the committee were sitting in the gallery during that time, and nobody said, I don't agree, I didn't support this. It's not unanimous, because it was reported at the microphone by a member of the committee that was unanimous. Our job isn't to go back and say, oh, now I want to hear each of your votes. So we got a report. So we have a report, and we got that report. Mm-hmm. What happened here is what we know, because we purposefully stayed out of this, because we wanted the folks who are involved in maintaining the building, our building fleet, our administrator, your department, we wanted those folks to be the ones to review the submissions. And I know Jeff has something to say. I know Ms. Fruity has something to say.
Let me address that real quick.
I'm going to step back.
It's a very important point, and I will tell you this. When that decision was made, we were all sitting right back there, and Matt Demings leaned over to me and said, that's not true. I did not vote. That is not a unanimous vote. And you know what I told Matt? I said, Matt, there's got to be some type of misunderstanding. Let's not make a big public stir about it right now in a meeting. Let's see if that's corrected. Then we had the other meeting where Seth Mutzler made his comments, and I thought, well, there's an opening too. Nothing there. Then when we had the final decision, again, and all of this is spelled out in this email if you've read it, the sheriff was watching and waiting to see if this was going to be corrected. I think it would have been, was it the right thing to do to stand up at that meeting and say, hey, wait a minute. But I promise you, that would have created an issue where everybody would have been looking around the room at each other going, what is going on? At that point, it was our true belief that there was some type of a misunderstanding and it would be corrected later. It never was. It never was.
I never heard from Matt Demings as to the fact that he felt that there was a problem. We cannot act on anything or respond to anything when we are not given information.
But someone on that committee knew that. Is it our job to relay that?
If Matt was on the committee,
Let me
he
speak
could
into
have.
this because you're accusing me of this. And I did tell the commissioners that we did not get a response from Mr. Demings
Okay.
or Kyle. The score sheets that are being referenced in this situation, when we met to go over those score sheets, We all met as a group. Matt wasn't there.
That's correct.
Matt also had missed a prior, he left a prior meeting of one of the respondents. There would have been a conversation of whether or not he could even vote because he did not finish that interview. We didn't talk about that either, right? The 5 people who were there, we walk in, myself, 2 other people have completed score sheets. Score sheets are designed to help people objectively define and determine, compare each entity against one another using the same standards. I explained that to the group that was there. We had a great conversation. When we got in, we talked about, everybody I think initially just kind of said, who do you think's your first one? Who's your number 1? Everybody had the same answer. Everybody said DLZ. Your person who was there brought his score sheet. He didn't have it filled out, but he filled it out during that meeting. So we're in there, we're talking, we're all having a wonderful conversation, very collaborative, very informative. It was a nice meeting. At some point during the end of that meeting, there was a question as to what do we do with these score sheets? Legal, who was there at the time, said, we don't need to keep them. So, okay. I don't know, I don't recall if your employee handed me his score sheet or if he took it and threw it away himself. I don't know that. But if he did hand it to me, he handed it to me knowing I was going to go put it in the trash can. So your issue here is you're questioning whether or not I informed these commissioners that Matt Deming wasn't there. Yes, I did. I also informed them that when I asked for, because then let's go back. So then Jeff was gone during all this, and he comes back and he says we should have kept the score sheets. Like, okay. The score sheets were sent electronically. In theory, mine was still electronic. I just had to, put it in another file folder. And so it was just a question of, hey, we need to have these now. Can you please fill them out and send them back to me so that we have them? It was clear that your staff was not going to complete those score sheets. I brought it up. We talked here. We asked Jeff to talk to you guys because of the relationship that exists between our offices, and to try to resolve and alleviate any problems that may be occurring with that request to recreate their score sheet. Matt never did a score sheet. He never said boo at any point in time. Nobody in your office that was part of this group ever raised any questions until after you guys did the presentation to CGRC about the jail, and after I had requested the redo of the score sheets. The score sheets, they should have been able to go in and score it right then. They, presuming, of course, if Matt actually had, because I'm actually not even sure he attended the last one, but I may be wrong on that. I've tried to find out and I can't find out. But I do know that he left early in one of the presentations, and I knew at that time that was going to affect whether or not he could even be considered in this. We didn't have that conversation because he wasn't there. And yes, I'm the one that made the mistake of saying it was a unanimous vote by the group that was there. There's nothing that said we had to have a score sheet. The vote was taken verbally. We talked about it verbally. When I asked for the score sheets, it was just so if any of the respondents wanted to see or understand why we chose the way we did, then we have a hard copy to show what it was. I'm the one who made the mistake of saying it was a unanimous decision. It was unanimous of the 5 people that were in that room.
Okay, let me address a couple of things there. I don't know how many interviews I've ever been involved in my career, but it's in the thousands. We're interviewing prospective troopers throughout my entire career. Never, ever in the history of me being involved in any interview process was the scoring criteria developed and sent 11 days after the interview. How do you score someone appropriately, if you don't even know you're going to be scoring them later, and you're not advised that you're going to be scoring them, you don't make any notes, and then all of a sudden 11 days later, you're given this score sheet to score these people. That's where Kyle Gibbons got off the rails and sent you the email.
That's Kyle Gibbons' fault, because I'll tell you what, we talked about it in between these interviews.
You score during an interview. You score after the interview.
No, you don't. You don't have to. Well,
Yes.
sir, that is your option. We chose
I'm
not
gonna,
to.
this is not a good
Thank you.
It's
way
not.
to resolve an issue.
It's not.
I was going to bring up a question before, because I wanted to make sure I understood what you're saying correctly. You had talked about this decision, right? And I guess that there wasn't a consensus on the decision. Is the decision you're talking about the score sheet and utilization of it, or the ultimate recommendation?
It's both. I mean, the way this is, if you talk to anybody out there, I promise you, they're going to say, wow, that process, everybody on that committee that was there doing this process, during this process, was absolutely in agreement with everything that occurred. Our objection is that none of these things that we're talking about here were ever mentioned. It was simply unanimous vote, we're great, let's move on. That's not what occurred. There are emails in here where Kyle Gibbons said, I am uncomfortable submitting score sheets after the fact. Okay, if that's the case where you don't have to do them during the interview, I've never seen it done that way, I can tell you that. I don't know how you can accurately do that, but that's an argument for another day. My point is that if this was done completely transparently, we would have made those known, as opposed to just saying the entire process, everybody was in agreement. They weren't. It's not true. It's not a true statement.
I would like to get a statement from Attorney Lee Baker on some of the items that you're raising here, and I think part of this is semantics. If we have an account of who all was present at the meeting when the initial vote was taken, and there were 5 individuals at that initial one, and we know what the vote was, then that was unanimous for those who were present at the meeting.
I agree.
And we can record and we can report to the public who those individuals were. We're talking about the vote, we're not even talking about the scoring sheet.
I agree, it's semantics. And then the semantics are, it was an illusion that this was a unanimous vote. It was an illusion that this entire process was completely done in a manner that everybody was in agreement on. It's important. It is important. I bet you talk to anybody, they're going to say, is it important that 2 of these members were concerned with how this committee was doing their business? They were so concerned that they did not want to score after the fact. That's important.
And it's important to me to acknowledge or to point out, at least this is my understanding, I would be happy to be corrected, but it's my understanding that Mr. Gibbons was uncomfortable completing a score sheet when he was asked to recreate what he had done in the meeting.
Yes.
You were not present at the meeting, so please do not tell me what
I
did
can
or
read
did
his
not
email
happen.
to you if you'd like.
You can read his email, but I'm saying that you were not present at the first meeting when score sheets were filled out, so you do not have firsthand knowledge as to whether or not he filled out a score sheet in that particular meeting.
Then I will bring Mr. Gibbons to a meeting, and I will have him stand right here and tell you he did not complete a score sheet, if that will be helpful. And then someone's going to have to make the decision of who's telling the truth.
Please step
I
up.
would think that the best resolution of this would to be have the committee meet, all 6 members, and go through the decision process and see if it's still fresh in their mind whether they can. This is the first I've heard that the ultimate decision of DLZ being the proper one is questioned. right? This is the first I've heard of it. I think the way to resolve this is to have that committee meet, or have that group meet. We'll notice it, open public meeting, have them do that work, decide if they can do that work at this point, and if they can, great. If they can't, I think we should redo all the interviews.
And I would ask that if Mr. Demings were not present for all of the interviews, that he excuse himself from that meeting, because, again, single designee was requested, not multiple.
Can I also say something?
Yes,
Because,
of course.
you know, it's difficult when you don't have anything that I can hand over and say, this is what happened. But when we were in that meeting, I was concerned that Matt wasn't there. And Kyle said that Matt shared the same opinion as Kyle. And I actually even asked, do we need to have another meeting? It was determined that that wasn't necessary. And everybody walked out of there understanding and believing the recommendation is going to be for DLZ.
Angie, I am not saying that the recommendation for DLZ is the wrong recommendation. I'm not saying that at all. There is no beef from anybody here about DLZ being the company that was selected. It's the manner in which the transparency of that process was presented in multiple meetings. And that, the manner in which it was presented is not
And did anybody
based with
think
fact.
to just pick up the phone and say, look, we have a concern about how this has been presented? Not one person.
Again, I've
Not one.
explained that also, that when we had that meeting, we fully expected. We were sitting right back there.
Well, you know, people
That-
don't have crystal balls.
That would be explained. I don't have one either.
Right.
That it would be explained. It wasn't explained. I told Matt, I said, there's got to be a miscommunication here. So we stood down. Then the same thing was presented, knowing all along that it wasn't based in fact.
In hindsight, doesn't it seem like this is a way worse way to do things?
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, wouldn't it have made sense to say something at the time? I think Mr. Cockrell has a good idea. But
The other thing that I think
defer to
is
my
worthy
colleagues.
of,
I just don't think that we're having a conversation and arguing over what happened at a meeting that none of us were at. And I'm not sure that this is productive for that reason. I get what you're saying, and I'm hearing you, and I'm
right.
processing all of it. I just don't know that this is a productive way to resolve anything. If none of us were there, of the four of us, we weren't there, so I can't make a determination, so.
Well,
And
another
I
thing
would like
I
to
think,
respond to one of the 9 items that are raised in this, as you asked us to do earlier. Yes, we were aware that Matt Demings did not participate in the vote for this.
thank you.
But that still does not take away from the fact that of those who were present, it was a unanimous decision.
It's not a unanimous decision if everybody doesn't vote.
If he's not, you've already raised the fact, you gave the example yourself.
This is a
and this
definitional
crazy.
question, right? This is
Yeah.
a definitional question. I
But-
think we all
He's not
agree
participating.
that the 5 members present voted for that, and that the 1 member who wasn't there did not vote for that, but didn't vote against it either. I think
Agreed.
if we're going to sit here and argue about what the definition of unanimous is,
I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing that we should have disclosed
it
that.
feels like that is
No,
What's
I'm
going
not
on?
arguing that. I'm arguing that we didn't disclose that. It was any meeting you have, you articulate who voted yay and nay. Look at the minutes. You articulate that. It was never disclosed.
I think it's safe to say that it has been disclosed now.
It
right?
has been disclosed
Right?
now.
I think everybody would acknowledge that The 5 members present voted for it. The 6th member was not present and therefore did not participate in the vote. I think that is clear right now, right?
It is, but only because we brought it forward here. It would have went into the annals of history and no one would have ever known.
And
That's not transparent. That is not transparent.
My feeling is that would have been great to know that that was a concern, if not at the initial presentation, but also at the commissioners meeting. And we can talk about that, right? I appreciate that concern has been raised. I really also think that my concern has a lot to do with did the decision reflect the course of action we're taking, right? The commissioners last week approved for me to negotiate an agreement with DLZ, right? The firmness of that decision is what I think is why I made the thought, hey, get the committee back together and see if that's still the case. I guess you pointed out a couple errors. One is I think we just acknowledged what that means now. And the other is with the scoring, and I don't know, and I think the committee who is in charge of producing that result should be the ones who talk about that result and then forward that information along.
I'd also like to add that I was not the facilitator of this committee. That was no designation. We were all appointed equally. When I came up with a score sheet, it's because nobody else did. So I wasn't the one who was in charge, if you will. We were all equally there.
Well, all I know is that every email that ever existed that I could find about this came from you.
Of course, because nobody else is
Well,
doing
that would need to indicate that you're facilitating it. Here's the other thing I wanted to say. It's not the decision, it's the process that was reached, and the lack of transparency in that process is that we're having issues with. Again, why wouldn't we have stood up here and said, okay, listen, here's what happened. 5 of the 6 members voted, 1 of them was absent. We had 2 of our members that, because of whatever reasons, they may have had in their heads, whatever it was, that did not submit score sheets. I just don't understand why the absolute truth is such an issue here that we just tell the public, here's what happened, instead of Mr. Kreider standing here and saying it was a unanimous decision, and there was no mention made of these issues that occurred in the committee. And as the sheriff said, the commissioners, being very excited about the fact that it was a seamless process, when in fact, I think had this information been transparently transmitted to the public, we would have had no issues at all. No issues at all.
So this was presented at a work session. It wasn't until at least a week later that we voted on this at a public session. Your office, Sheriff's Office, had an opportunity for a whole week to raise these issues and decided, for whatever reason, not to do that. This could have been corrected without all this brouhaha and unnecessary finger pointing
Behind
that I
closed
do not
doors.
appreciate.
Behind closed doors.
If I would have gotten information that the sheriff's office was uncomfortable with the statement made at the work session, then the statement made at the regular session would have reflected those concerns, right? The behind closed doors is not, I'm
Jeff,
trying not to, because in my mind, the statement of a unanimous vote when everybody who was present voted for it is not an incorrect statement. I hear that that was a concern of the sheriff's department. I also don't have a problem with, hey, we had 6 people who went through, who looked at, who were a part of the interviews. only 5 of them were at that meeting, but of the 5, this is what the vote, I mean, to me, that is something that it would have been easy to address and easy to discover, right? I hear that there additional are concerns about the scoring sheets and all that, and in my mind, that's have another meeting of that group and let them resolve those. You're telling me that they were uncomfortable. Let them. Why all these kind of things that I know you weren't there. You can't answer. So I guess I hear what you're saying. I hear what the commissioners are saying. I think that in my mind, the issues you brought forward are ones of the committee, and why wouldn't we just let the committee meet and resolve those issues if they can, and if they can't, they can't, right? I guess that's...
I think we already have voted on whether or not to name DLZ to this process. I think that is all in the past. I think one of the things that I would like to take from this is that we need to ensure that we look at different processes going forward. But for me, the decision is already made. We have acknowledged that Matt Demmons did not participate in the vote. We have acknowledged that of those who were present for the vote, it was a unanimous vote. We can report it out as a 5-0 vote. We're doing this publicly here today, but I don't see the point in rehashing this. That's my opinion. I'm one of 3, and I'm stating my opinion publicly here.
I think it would be useful to have Mr. Baker address, because he was present, just to have him address the questions that have been raised. I understand the point that if somebody's not there, they're not voting, but they weren't absented through anyone else's actions. They absented themselves, and so I don't know how that is impactful in terms of a decision, because if I don't attend a commissioners meeting, I can't come back later and say, you know, I don't agree with the vote because I should have been here.
And the fact that you weren't there would be noted.
If I might. So I would like Mr. Baker, because I think, just to be fair to all of us, I think if Mr. Baker can provide the information, I think that's a good first step, and then we can see if there's a need to recall the committee together for any reason. We can ask Mr. Baker to consider that question maybe.
I would like to know what it is you want. What is your goal?
Our goal is that when we do something like this, when we make the public aware of what happened and what happened, we tell them what happened in the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. In other words, we tell them there were 6 members on this committee. 5 of them voted, 1 of them was not. Instead of saying all the people on that committee voted for DLZ. The second part is that when there are concerns enough that people say, hey, I'm not going to submit a score sheet here because I'm not comfortable submitting a score sheet that was given to me 11 days after the interview, that we acknowledge that in the public forum, that 2 people didn't vote, instead of making the appearance that the whole thing was all agreeable.
Kyle's concern was when I asked for him to resubmit it. Yeah. There were no concerns prior to that. He said he wanted to talk about it at the meeting, but his concern regarding the process was stated when I asked for them to resubmit.
And I want to make it clear that the submission of the score sheet is not a vote, right?
What?
It's not a vote, right?
The submission of the score sheet.
You said, and I saw it because it's on the transcription, that you said that 2 people did not vote. And I think that is...
No, one person didn't vote, 2 people didn't submit score sheets.
And I think that is accurate. But I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure that the score sheet and vote are 2 very related, in my mind, issues, but they're not the same.
Yeah, I just think it's important that when we made the public announcement of this, that all of that was included, because it's true. It's the truth.
And
We should never have any
And
trouble
it-
with the truth.
And in my mind, part of the responsibility for making that correction was on the sheriff's department. We don't have that knowledge. You have the knowledge. You were the people that failed to share that with us.
You didn't have
So-
the knowledge that score sheets weren't submitted.
We have not seen the score sheets for a lot of reasons, but I want to talk about moving forward. Nothing is going to change about the selection of DLZ. We all agree that the people that voted was unanimous, and so for those folks, it's done. It's done for us in terms of who we selected. It's not going to change anything. If you think that there are processes that need to be improved within Monroe County, I would like to see a written proposal from your office on what that should be.
It's right there. It's already been submitted to you.
That is not a proposal for how to improve a process. That is a lot of questions and a lot of demands.
Be
I would like to
transparent.
see a proposal if you were willing to do it.
It wasn't the process, it was the transparency of the process. I don't think anybody needs to explain that.
Okay, well, thank you.
It was not intended. There was absolutely zero intention to mislead anyone. And so if you had stated to us at any point in time after that initial work session, hey, we would like it on the record, like, okay. There was absolutely zero intention to mislead anybody.
I explained that when
Okay.
that work session was, we were as surprised as
We
anybody.
can,
And you had a week after that to correct the record.
And
I
we
think we're
were-
just rehashing a lot of things.
Yes,
and-
we are.
And so at this point, I'd like to call to adjourn the meeting. Thank you for your attendance today and
Thank
for your
you.
patience.